Take each game and its merits there.
Well, you're very welcome to our latest episode of Each Game on Its Merits, and today we are talking about the Belgium-Ireland game in 1928. My name is Aon O'Riordan, and I'm joined as always by
Jerry Farrell. Hello everyone.
And this is, Jerry, a kind of a rest is history three-parter, because in 1928, 1929 and 1930 we play one game per year, and they're all against Belgium. So we're going to be talking a lot about Belgium, Belgian football, and the Irish team of that time. So we've come out of the Olympics. We play a game in 1926 against Italy, 27 against Italy, and now we're playing in February of 1928 away to this Belgian side. So we win this game 4-2. I'll just go quickly through the synopsis as given by Donal Cullen in the Ireland on the Ball book. And it says, with the defence on both sides playing well, there are a few scoring chances until Pierre Brian, I'm terrible at these, I got a D and even Sir French, headed in Van Averbeck's cross. Francois Ledent added a second for Belgium before the break. The start of the second half was delayed due to a sudden thunderstorm during the interval. On the resumption, the Irish adapted well to the conditions, and after 10 minutes, White scored. Lacey equalised when he scored from 17 yards, and Golding set up White for a third. White could have had a hat-trick when he was clean through, but the goalkeeper made a fine save at his feet. Vandenberg was injured later on and was forced to leave the field, a teammate replacing him in goal. The deputy keeper was beaten once, a penalty awarded for handball by Sullivan. So we'll go to the team very quickly. There's 8 debutants here, Jerry. I'll go to them and their team, if you like. With Harry Cannon goal for Bowes, Sam Robinson, who we need to talk about, who's a brother of Christy Robinson that we've spoken about before. Jack McCarthy from Bowes. Joe Kinsella is a debutant from Shells. Jack Sullivan from Fordsons. Paddy Barry from Fordsons. Jack Squib Byrne from Bray Unknowns. Bill Lacey. Jimmy Blind White, I believe you called that. That was his nickname from Bowes. Charlie Dowdall from Fordsons. And Joseph Golding from Shamrock Rovers. So it's a 4-2 win against Belgium. Belgium had won the gold medal in the 1920 World Cup, and they would appear in the Olympics. What did I say? The Olympics?
Yeah,
gold medal in
Olympics.
the 1920 Olympics. Yeah, sorry. They won the gold in the Olympics in 1920, and they appear in the 1930 World Cup. So Belgium, they're an interesting footballing nation, Jerry.
Absolutely, and I suppose at this point in time when we meet them, they're on a bit of a bad run of form, but I'll come back to some of the individual players in that team, are some of whom are still very prominent historically in Belgian football, hugely important to the development of Belgian football history. But we might start at the beginning, and the beginning of Belgian football, we can claim an Irishman, because one of these great origin stories, and I always take these, I think these stories have to be taken with a very large sprinkling of salt, because I don't think any one person is always responsible for introducing football in somewhere. I mean, even in Ireland, John McAleary would claim that he and he alone was responsible, to use his own words, but we know that there was a lot of people involved in developing association football in Ireland. Similarly, there's a lot of these stories in places like Argentina and Brazil that, a sailor from England or Scotland gets off a ship and has a ball, and all of a sudden they're playing on the dockside, and then football takes off. It's always more complicated than that.
Yeah.
But we do have an Irish kind of footballing missionary in the shape of Cyril Mora Bernard, who's from a wealthy Kerry family, and he apparently is studying in university in Belgium, and he brings the football with him.
Okay.
And in 1863, and from there the wellspring of Belgian football grows. Just as an aside, if anyone knows Foxford in County Mayo and Foxford woolen mills and things like that, his sister, who joined a religious order, became Sister Mary Ascensius, is the person responsible for the Foxford woolen mills. So a little aside.
There you go.
So we have an Irishman at the very beginning of Belgian football. But
right.
This game we have to talk about in 1928. We have to talk about it in the context of maybe that 1920 Olympics win and the aftermath of the First World War, because this is still very much prevalent.
We have a long-standing, tricky relationship with this country. Footballing relationship.
Yes.
Right?
We are talking... as we
this is the beginning
this,
of it.
We're around, actually...
Right, we're having a friendly. Yeah. At the time of recording.
At the time of recording, yes.
Right, we're about to play them. But like my first memory of Ireland playing is a 2-2 draw against them in '86. There's a generation of Irish football fans are traumatised by a game where we lost 1-0 in a qualifier for the 1982 World Cup. And anybody who saw that game, I think it was the first time they realised that life wasn't fair. But we'll talk about that again. I'm actually wearing a jersey from the 1997 playoff for the World Cup, where we were properly done in the rain in Brussels. But anyway, there's something about Belgium. There's something about Belgium that actually kind of, and our football relationship with them, that makes people a bit uneasy. But anyway, well, that's all for the future.
Yes.
Back to 1928.
And look, there is a little bit of even a snide criticism by folks in the IFA that, you know, our first 2 games are against Italy, and then we're playing 3 games against Belgium, so we're only playing Catholic nations in their view. But anyway, we'll come to that again.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a little bit of condescension from
really?
the IFA offices that, you know, this is typical of the Free State only playing other Catholic nations. But we'll go back to 1920. So 1920, the Olympics are in Antwerp, and this is a very symbolic thing because the defeated powers are kind of persona non grata. There's a bit. It's one of the reasons that the home nations leave FIFA is that eventually Germany and some of the defeated powers are allowed back into FIFA. But in 1920, they're not personae. They're not welcome at the Olympics. Antwerp is chosen as a host city partially because it symbolises a Belgian resistance to the Kaiser and German expansionism and so on. So it's a very pointed political thing. And people say, oh, politics and sport don't mix. They always have.
They always have. And they always will.
And part of that team that...
Otherwise we won't have a podcast
otherwise we won't
anymore.
have a podcast. No. But a big part of that squad in 1920, unsurprisingly, are veterans of the First World War. And a lot of them are...
Young men just back from the...
Exactly, yeah. And they do quite well in the Olympics. They beat France, they beat Spain, they beat the Netherlands, and they do quite well. On the other side of the draw, Czechoslovakia, which is kind of this new state that's formed out of the collapse of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, they're doing exceptionally well, and they get to a final, and the final ends in controversy, and it's unique because I don't think any major finals ended this way. The game ends after 43 minutes. Belgium are winning 2-0 against Czechoslovakia, but there's a lot of unhappiness on the Czech side because they give away a penalty in the opening minutes, which they claim shouldn't have been given because they say the keeper was fouled. And then a player is sent off for a fairly stonewall, like he literally clocks a Belgian player and it gets sent off. But they're very unhappy with the decisions by the English referee, a guy called John Lewis, not he of department store fame. John Lewis is one of the founders of Blackburn Rovers way back in the 1870s. So John Lewis is 65 refereeing this match. His linesman is a guy called Charles Rayford Brown, who's a former English international football and cricketer, and apparently the man who came up with the phrase soccer as a compression of association football.
Because somebody said something like rugger to him, and he said,
"Yes, rugger or
soccer." Yeah,
exactly.
Okay.
So they're the officials. So the Czechoslovakians leave in protest. They make a protest to the International Olympic Committee.
They walk off the pitch in the 39th minute.
Yes.
To protest the officiating after Czechoslovak left back Karl Steiner was ejected for assaulting Belgian striker Robert Copé.
And Copé has scored the penalty. He scored a hat-trick in the previous round against Spain.
So this is like Leinster Senior League stuff.
Yeah.
Actually, not even Leinster Senior League
and
stuff.
This is a huge game because this stadium, I think, in Antwerp holds about 25,000, 40,000 plus
turn up.
In. So it's a roasting hot day. This is a very kind of febrile atmosphere. The Belgian army kind of have to give the Czech players an escort off the pitch. The Czechoslovakians are very critical that the Belgian fans are very abusive towards them. So it's really all kicks off.
It's
Belgium win the gold.
Days.
Belgium win the gold.
Right.
Now,
okay.
Among that squad, so the guy 8 years later, we'll fast forward.
Who's still playing?
Liège. So the guy who's captaining Belgium that day, Armand Swartenbrooks.
Yes.
And I hope I'm doing
SWARTENBROOKS.
Yes, so he's the captain. He's the kind of centre half. He's playing for a club called Daring Brussels, who are...
they sound great.
They do, and they're one of the top sides at the time. He's a very experienced player. He ends up winning nearly 60 caps, which is a huge amount in this era of football, with so few fixtures. And he's a very interesting guy because he's a World War I veteran. He and his brother Alexis basically joined the war effort in 1914. He's a medical student, so he's obviously treating people in the trenches. He saves loads of people's lives apparently, but he also has to deal with the horrors of amputations and operations with anaesthetic, all this horrible stuff that the war is inflicting on Belgium. But he also is a very progressive minded guy, so he says, well, we'll use football. All these guys are in the trenches who are good footballers that I know. We're going to play charity and fundraising matches for injured soldiers. they create a kind of a football front 11 that tours around and plays some of the top English clubs at the time in wartime matches. They play kind of representatives of other national armies, so they play the Italian army, they play the English army, all this sort of stuff. They do very, very well. And the basis of that kind of wartime footballer team is the basis of the 1920 Olympic gold medal winning squad. And he later becomes a politician. He's a mayor of his local town just outside Brussels. He's a really, really interesting guy.
Right. So he's the only surviving member of that 1920 successful,
in this line,
controversially successful team.
Yes.
Okay. Now this is a fairly substantial win for Ireland. It's a 4-2 win. Ireland haven't won a game, by the way, since 1924.
Yes, this is our first win since the Olympics.
Right. Okay.
Or just after the Olympics.
And currently in the annals of Irish football history, our first official win.
Exactly. Yes.
Because currently we don't count the 1924 team. So, and we were 2-0 down. Am I right in saying that? We're 2-0 down at half time. We're 2-0 down, and the rain helps us to romp to a 4-0.
Yes. As happens a few times this year, the kind of wet weather suits the Irish. And as two other players just worth mentioning there, playing for Beerschot, the Brain brothers, Pierre and Raymond Brain. Raymond is a guy who will become the first professional footballer, first Belgian professional footballer, but not in Belgium. So at the time, and we've talked about this, a lot of leagues are amateur at the time. It's only professionalism is only emerging. So Raymond, it's kind of this workaround that they have in the club owners and directors that they get a player like a cafe or a bar for them to run as a kind of secret under the counter sort of payment. So Raymond Brain,
like a GA player becoming a teacher in a local. In a
county.
I mean, that would never have happened in Kildare in the 90s under Mick O'Dwyer.
No, couldn't possibly.
No, when people from Kerry were very successful in transferring their teaching careers to Kildare and managed to play for the county team.
Yes, PE teacher or what have you.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah.
So Raymond Brain gets a cafe in 1929, and the Belgian FA basically say, look, unless you're from a family that runs a cafe or a bar, this is no longer allowed. This is prohibited. So Raymond going, oh well, look, I can't run my cafe. He accepts an offer to go play for Sparta Prague, who are a newly emerging professional team, the Danubian school of football, which is very progressive around Prague and Budapest and Vienna. So he goes there. He's offered a very good amount of money. He has a phenomenally successful time there. Wins league titles, wins a Metropa Cup with Sparta Prague. And he's so successful that they actually asked him to play in the 1934 World Cup, but he turns it down because he's a proud Belgian. But because he's gone to play in Sparta Prague, he misses out on the 1930 World Cup, and he actually doesn't make his World Cup debut for Belgium until 1938, so 10 years after this game.
Right.
But he's one of their most prolific goal scorers. He's super successful. He's probably one of their great early players, and of course their first professional. And then Pierre is his brother, who plays in that game, who doesn't get a cafe and doesn't go to Czechoslovakia.
Oh, okay. Right, okay. Well, speaking of another pair of brothers, because on the Irish side, Sam Robinson makes his debut today in this game. Now, Sam Robinson's brother, Christy, we'd already spoken about, played in the 1924 team. We've spoken to his grandson, Kevin Robinson. Sam Robinson is also an interesting chap. His name is actually Jeremiah Robinson, but he's known as Sam. And he was involved in the War of Independence. He was one of Michael Collins' squad. I think he was more of a lookout than a gunman. And we spoke before about Christy Robinson and his activity. But Sam Robinson on the day of Bloody Sunday was a lookout on Mount Street and was involved there. And then his first cousin Perry Robinson was the first person killed, shot dead in Croke Park on that morning. So the Robinsons are steeped in sort of in the history of that day. And then later, he becomes an Irish soccer international, and this is where he makes his debut.
Yes, and if we are successful in our campaign to get Christie's caps against Estonia recognised, that would make them the first pair of brothers to play for Ireland.
Ah, right. Okay, that would be substantial. Yeah.
I've interviewed Sam's son, Eamon. So Sam's young son, Eamon, is still alive, still with us, still hale and hearty. He's actually written a book about his father called Seed of Freedom. So Sam, as I say, is a young man. He lies about his age.
Yes.
He's the younger of the brothers, so Christy is 2 years older. So he lies about his age. He has Finney Byrne, who is a prominent member of the squad,
vouches for him.
That he is in fact 17 when he says he's 15 or something like that. As I say, he is a lookout on Bloody Sunday. He's then later involved in the burning of the Custom House, and he's arrested in that. And there's a famous photograph. If you Google burning at the Custom House, you can see all these guys with their hands on their head.
And he's one of them.
He's
right.
been landed by the British soldiers. So, and then he's a very close personal kind of confidant and friend of Michael Collins. He's with Collins that morning down in Cork when he drives up to Bale and Blah. Now he's not with him at Bale and Blah. He meets him in the Imperial Hotel in Cork City. He's down there as part of the Free State Army. And as you say, he after basically he's demobilised, he goes back into playing football more seriously. He also sets up his own company as a kind of a builder and plasterer. So Eamon told me that the last job he ever did as a working man, he plastered the interior of the Fisra Tower at the shopping centre in Dalymet.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he worked with his dad on that. So he's talking about his dad plastering the building, saying, "Look, I used to play out there in Dalymet Park."
Right.
Sam apparently comes from his use of a thing called Sambook, which is a kind of like the equivalent of Deep Heat.
Oh, really? So it's just right.
That's where the nickname.
That's where he wasn't called Jerry. Right. Again, a fascinating. I'm trying to think of other brothers. Then was it the O'Leary brothers? Pierce O'Leary and Dave O'Leary would be two internationals.
Yeah.
Who else? I'm trying to think. Would there have been a pair of brothers who played? I'm sure anybody who's listening to this can forward us in.
I'm just saying, obviously, there's a big Bows contingent there because Bows have won all 4 trophies that are available. They've won the League, the Cup, the League of Ireland Shield, and the Leinster Senior Cup. And like, there's 4 Bohemians represented.
Four Bohemians, 3 from Fordsons, 1 from Bray Unknowns, which is a precursor to Bray Wanderers, 2 Shells, and 1 Shamrock Rovers, and 8 debutants. So it's a whole new team, really.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so 4-2, and it's a sizable victory for us, and we keep playing them. We played them in 1929 and we played them in 1930. So nobody else wants to play. I mean, again, to re-emphasize, we're out of the home championships, right? The home nations championships. So that was the feature of football from the 1880s onwards, were these 3 games that we played every year against England, Scotland, and Wales, and they're gone now. They're gone since the early 20s. So while the IFA still have those 3 games that they play routinely every year, we are now looking for internationals, and we were basically playing 1 a year. And we didn't even play in 1925. So we're 1 game in 26, 1 game in 27, 1 game in 28, 1 game in 29, 1 game in 1930. Like 5 years, 5 games.
Yeah,
it's hardly embedding this sense of this Irish team and connecting it with the Irish public. And also, this game is played away.
This is played in Liège in front of 25,000, if you believe the figures from the time.
Yeah.
It's also worth noting, so what's happening in 1928 and what happened in 1924? Belgium are preparing for the Olympics, which is in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
So Ireland compete at this. Pat O'Callaghan wins a gold for hammer throwing. But Ireland don't compete as a footballing nation at that.
Why not?
So again, this comes down to some of the stuff we've encountered before. Internal arguments. So JJ Keane, who we mentioned,
big GA person.
Yes, and there's kind of bit of animosity, and because football is becoming more popular, he then asked Jim Brennan, who is I think he's the chairman of the FAI at the time, would he help with fundraising, and he kind of remembers that Mr. Keane and the Irish Olympic Committee weren't particularly helpful in the past, so they don't do that. There's still arguments about whether the Olympic team is still, in theory, a 32 county state, but at the moment there's arguments going on. So what happens here, and you've talked about there on the IFA are still playing their 3 matches per season. They play an amateur international against France in 28 as well, and there's complaints made to FIFA because they style themselves as Ireland while they're playing France. They refer to the head of the Irish Football Association. They don't make reference that they are only the football association that governs the 6 counties.
Yeah.
And they basically are very upset with this and saying you represent yourself as Ireland, but you're flying the Union flag, you're singing God Save the King, all this sort of stuff. Whereas we are really Ireland. And we've mentioned there the flag is flown in Turin at the Italy game. I found an interesting tidbit that they did want to play the soldier song, but because the Italian band was made up of it's kind of supposed like the Artane band, they're all kids. They can't learn soldier song straight away because they've only seen the sheet music for the first time.
So they can't adapt to a new tune.
So in Belgium is the first time that the soldier song is played on a foreign field, as it were.
Okay.
So the Belgians already have an Irish flag ready to go to welcome us. They play the soldier song. And they play it twice. They actually play it at the end to celebrate the Irish victory as an acknowledgement, as a kind of a doffing your cap, saying, well played, lads, you got a good win. I'd say, Jimmy White, as we were saying, making his debut, he scores 2 goals. Apparently could have had a hat-trick, as you say there. The continuing the theme of stuff, serious injury, so Lewis...
Excuse me for laughing, but there is a bit of a theme here of people coming the cropper in these games.
Lewis van der Berg injures himself, gives away a penalty, and then is replaced in goal by the centre half Henry van der Averbeek. For the last kind of 10 minutes, and kind of he's then hobbling around. So Belgium are effectively down to 10 men, and Ireland going to run out handy 4-2 winners. I'm going to throw out there. I'm guessing Billy Lacey is probably the oldest goal scorer for Ireland, because he scores in this game. He's 38 at the time.
A child. Well, when you're my age, you feel that 38 is a child. Yes. Okay. Right. So he's 30. That's a fine age. Okay. So to bring this to a conclusion, our first of our 3-part series on Ireland-Belgium games, I think it's really interesting about this team trying to connect itself with the Irish Soccer Republic. I'm assuming at this time it really is League of Ireland football that gets people interested. The international team is not really connecting with people. There isn't an international competition that Ireland are involved in. The World Cup hasn't even started yet, and in the 1920s, we only played 2 games at home, effectively. Since independence, if you like. So just building this momentum around this team and having this connection with the Irish football public it's a slow thing. It's a slow burner.
It is. But what we know is that, as we're discussing, it's very hard to organise fixtures at the time. We know we have a kind of reciprocal match against Belgium again in Dublin the following year. And there's a chance then to get bums on seats. And also, the crucial thing as well is this is the main source of income for the FAI. The FAI do get money from cupcakes and things like that and inter-league matches, but the big source of income is getting bums on seats or feet on terraces in Dalymount Park and getting big attendances there, because mostly what we see at this time is away trips cost a lot of money and they end up incurring a loss. Okay, all right. So at this point in time, it's the first official win that an FAI senior international men's side had, even though we would contend otherwise, and we believe we're well on the way to achieving recognition for the 1924 side. But this game, we beat Belgium 4-2 away from home in the Standard Liège ground, and it's a solid win, and it should be celebrated. And we're talking about now almost 100 years later. Next week on our podcast, we're talking about the home fixture, where we beat Belgium 4-0, and there's a couple of interesting names that come into the mix, including a very famous goalkeeper who couldn't play the 1927 game against Italy because he was keeping goal for Cardiff City in the FA Cup final.
Tom Farquharson, and anybody who's ever been on our football walking tour will know that Tom Farquharson is a big hero of ours. On the football walking tour, go on to at Football Tour Dub if you're interested in upcoming fixtures or tours. Obviously, there's in conjunction with the Little Museum of Dublin. You can go onto their website or email us at footballwalkingtour@gmail.com. But until next week, that's each game on its merits.